Now, throughout the writing process, you are, of course, going to want to completely avoid plagiarism. So, what exactly is plagiarism? Well, quoting another's words without acknowledgement. Obviously, that's probably the most blatant act of plagiarism. But there are other forms of plagiarism as well. Summarizing another's ideas without acknowledgement. So even if this is why it's very important, even if you're paraphrasing somebody's ideas, but you're not giving an actual quote, right? A direct quote clearly is plagiarism. But even if you're okay, here's an idea, blah, 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 but you don't actually give the source for that idea, that also is plagiarism. Another form of plagiarism is copying another's structure without acknowledgement. So let's say you're writing a thesis. This would be really more important if you're writing a longer work with chapters, let's say. You copy, even if you acknowledge their idea, and even if you acknowledge quotes, direct quotes. But if you actually chapter by chapter copy the same structure as another work, that too is considered plagiarism. So all of these are absolute no-nos, of course. So part of figuring out how to avoid plagiarism is asking yourself, well, when should I summarize? When should I paraphrase? When should I quote? Right. So summarize to give a general context. And in that case, let's say you're summarizing a particular source. You give the general context, you give the general idea of what is being talked about in this source. And then at the end of that whole section, you then give the reference. Okay. Paraphrasing is a little bit more focused. So let's say you're paraphrasing a specific idea from an author. You're not using their language, you're using your own words. Okay. And it might just be one paragraph that you've paraphrased, right? At the end of that paragraph, you then give the reference for it. In summarizing and paraphrasing, no quotation marks are necessary, but you have to give the reference to show where you got the ideas from. Okay. When you're quoting, that is when you use direct words from the source and you have to put it in quotation marks. Okay. And you do that really for very specific purposes. So either it provides evidence backing up your argument and you really want to show that evidence, right? Or it's strikingly original phrasing in the source that you're using, and something gets lost if you try to paraphrase it in your own words, because that striking original phrasing can often carry meaning. It can evoke meaning in itself, so you want to carry that over into what you're talking about. There's a compelling expression of your ideas, so use it for that. Now, I mean, the best way to use quotes here would not be, and this is another thing, make sure that you don't let the quotes do all the talking for you. If you want to express your ideas and you found a quote that really compels, in a compelling way, expresses your ideas for you, don't just use that quote. Rather, do try to express it in your own words first, and then say, as is illustrated by this quote, and then you can give the quote. So the idea is that make your point first, and then back it up with a quote. Or if you're engaging an author, you could say, well, here's a quote. Now I'm going to, and so give the quote, and then you're going to discuss it, right? So don't just sort of use quotes to make your point for you. Think of quotes as something that accompanies your own writing, and that you engage with in your own writing, but that it doesn't constitute your writing. Okay, it doesn't constitute the body of your writing. It accompanies it, and you engage with it. And then it's same thing here. It's something to be debated or disagreed with. And this is very important too, because let's say you're critiquing an author. Well, you better make sure that you know exactly what that author is saying before you start debating or disagreeing with them, right? And one of the best ways to make sure that your readers know, what that person is saying, is to give the quote. So you give the quote and you say, oh, so-and-so says, here's the quote, I disagree with this for this reason. Right? So in other words, you want to make sure that you're not accidentally making a straw man argument, right? So you don't make a claim that somebody says, that somebody thinks such and such, and then you're disagreeing with them, but you haven't actually given the quote, because if you give the quote, then the reader can judge for themselves whether or not your criticism is valid, right? So you want to be fair to the people that you're criticizing.